This segment has been sponsored by Pro Bikes Caribbean. Pro Bikes Caribbean, get yours today. Before we get into today's interview, hear a little bit about the book from the author themselves.
Hi, my name is Pamela Haynes, Barbadian author of 2 fiction books called Loving the Brothers and Loving the Sisters. My multi-award-winning books are for adults as they cover domestic abuse. Both books are available online at Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Greetings, listenership. Welcome to TLC, Tropical Literature Creatives, the podcast where we interview authors of Caribbean heritage about themselves and about their literary works. Today, I'm most excited to host one of our authors and a fellow podcaster, Miss Pamela R. Haynes. Pamela, welcome to Tropical Literature Creatives.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
No, it is my pleasure. It is my pleasure. In doing research for the interview, I've come across a couple of your accomplishments, and I was really excited to converse with you and just get some details as to yourself, your works, and how it is that your work can be applied not just to the Caribbean, but also to the area that you find yourself in. But before we go any further, which Caribbean island do you have ties with?
Yes, I have ties with Barbados. Both of my parents are Barbadian, and I've had the opportunity to travel to Barbados several times since I was 12 years old. So I love the place. I'm looking forward to going back, hopefully next year.
That sounds really encouraging because we're looking forward to having you. Um, in terms of your work, are you a full-time author?
I would say so because I'm now retired. I had a career in the British criminal justice system for just over 30 years, and I retired in 2018. And I picked up writing a couple of years before that as well. And my first book was published in January 2018. So, yeah, I would say I've morphed into it. But yes, I would say I'm a full-time author now.
Okay, in terms of your books, in doing research, I would have come across the 3 books that, well, at the time it was 2 books. I'm not too sure if it's 3 books now. The first being Loving the Brothers, for which you received a lot of acclaim and awards for, Loving the Sisters. And in doing my research, I came across a 3rd book, Loving the Children. Can you just give us a brief insight into what these 3 books are about?
Yeah, the books are a trilogy. The first book was Loving the Brothers. That was a passion project. I wanted to write a book before my milestone birthday, and met a publisher in 2016, and she helped me through the process. And my book was published 8 weeks before my milestone birthday. What I didn't expect was the reaction to the book that I got from other readers. And that spurred me on to start the sequel to the book, which is Loving the Sisters. I wrote that during the pandemic, finished in August 2020, and then went on a look for an agent and to represent me at the Big 5 publishing houses in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, I've got all the rejection letters here to prove how that wasn't successful at all. But I persevered, and it took another 2 years. And I got a 3-book publishing offer from a small press in South Carolina. And they gave me the opportunity to rewrite Loving the Brothers, write Loving the Sisters, and the 3rd book is called Loving the Children, which I'm writing at the moment. So I've got 2 books published and one that I'm authoring at the moment, and I'm really enjoying the creative process of putting those books together. Putting the new characters in the book as well. So yeah, I'm having a ball actually putting the trilogy together. So eventually it will be a trilogy of books.
Now, that sounds most interesting. In terms of the first book, Loving Your Brothers, I understand it was nominated for the Powerhouse Global Award for Author of the Year.
That's right, in 2018, and also a Black Excellence Award in the same year as well. So the book picked up 2 awards that year. And it's really nice to be able to get dressed up and to go to these events, and you always come away with new friends and new contacts, and to be a winner on top of it's really special. That I love the idea that someone took the time to fill out the nomination form, to send it in, and just out of the blue, you get a phone call to say, did you know you were nominated for this award and you're a finalist? So that's been really, really exciting.
No, it's great to hear that you would have received acclaim and recognition. In London, I believe, is where you reside right now. How has the reception for the book been in the Caribbean, to your understanding? Has it been the same?
Yes, it has, and it's been wonderful. So in 2019, I got to go to Barbados, got to go home, see my parents, and to have a book launch in Barbados. And that was fantastic. So I had a book launch at a bookshop called Shuttle House Books in a area called Fontebelle, which is not far, which is on the Legends Complex in St. Michael in Bridgetown. And we had a ball. I had to give up my seat to let people sit down because my family, friends, and colleagues that I have in Barbados, they came out for me. And, we had music, we had food, we had drinks, and I did several readings from the book. And we had, people from Barbados, other professionals who came out to contribute to the themes arising from the books as well. So that was really good. So a woman called Barbara Goddard, she is in charge of a charity in Barbados called Advocates Against Domestic Abuse, which is one of the themes I cover in my books. And she came out and to talk about her work. And she also made me an ambassador for the charity in Barbados as well, which I'm very passionate about. And we try to raise funds and other items that women who are escaping domestic abuse may need to reinvent themselves and to, have productive lives post escaping a domestic abuse situation. So I'm very proud of the work that Barbara and her colleagues do there in Barbados. I also got to go on TV. Now, this was really huge for me. That was Morning Barbados, Good Morning Barbados. I think it was Cassandra Crawford was the journalist I met in the studio. And when you're in the green room at 5 o'clock in the morning, you think to yourself, what am I doing here? But it was surreal to go from being a viewer and a fan of the show to actually being on breakfast television was absolutely huge. And my Bajan family, they came out, and the phone calls were calling my parents. The phones was off the hook, and that was really nice. And we had a couple of newspapers who came out to the new book launch. So some journalists came out from the Nation newspaper and covered our event and covered my books and the work that I'm doing there as well. So it was an absolutely fantastic reception. Had one or two senators who came out to the event as well. So that's why I'm looking forward to going back in 2024 and do it bigger, do it, a lot bigger and invite more people.
That sounds really exciting. I think my heart leapt a bit when it is that you mentioned the support that you would have received from your family and from all the persons who would have turned out. I mean, some persons, authors, they usually just write the books by themselves. You may have an editor in between, but when, it turns into something like this, it's like the joy is multiplied, and it can't just help but feel really, really good at seeing the end product of your work.
Oh,
Curious,
absolutely.
is this the end of your work? Because I think it's interesting, because here it is, you wrote a book and you mentioned when it is that you went to this function, you received an award, you have been designated ambassador as well. Are there any other titles or roles that have been placed upon you since you have written your book, or books, I
The
should say?
funny thing is, when I was growing up, I lived in an area where you weren't really accepted, told to go back to where you come from. It was a predominantly white English area. Being able to go to Barbados from 12 years old and being called English girl, you can get you don't really get a really positive image of self and what you're about and identity and where you're from. And to be embraced by the Barbadian community the way that I have done, has just been amazing in terms of grounding me as an individual. So back in September, I was shortlisted for a Caribbean Global Award. in the category to do with the work that I do, and also as an unsung hero. And to be able to come to that event and meet other Caribbean people. The High Commissioner of Barbados was there, the High Commissioner of Trinidad was there, the High Commissioner of Dominica, everybody was there. And then when they called my name to come up, I mean, I was genuinely lost for words. But the bit that's got me was when I got off the stage and the High Commissioner of Barbados said, "Yes, Miss Barbados, go on." Yeah, and he gave me a big, big hug. And I just felt right. I am Caribbean. I am a Black woman, and this is where I belong. So it was a really beautiful, beautiful moment. And I've had exposure in the newspapers, both locally, nationally, and internationally. I think I've officially lost count with the number of radio interviews that I have had as a result as well. The list is absolutely long over the last 5 years. I've even been a judge on Miss Barbados UK pageant, and that was a fantastic experience as well. So the experiences that I've had and the opportunities that have come my way as a result of writing this book have just been absolutely amazing. I've been able to do a lot more things than just write the books. So, for example, I have written the foreword for books, aspiring authors who are about to be published. I have traveled to Ireland, to Dublin, to be a speaker around the issues that I raise in my book. And it's just been fantastic. I've been very well received.
Recounting the experiences that you've had, the awards that you would have received. And I remember coming across some of them, one of them being I think it's the Global Community Outreach Service Caribbean Hybrid Award.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
It was wonderful. Again, a lovely opportunity to get dressed up. My sister is a makeup artist, so she did my makeup for me. Put on. It was just especially post-pandemic where we were locked up for the best part of 2 years, and to be able now to go out and to enjoy a fine dining experience, to meet royalty, to meet ambassadors and other dignitaries and other authors and people in the room. It was just it was electrifying to be in the room as well with other people who are aspiring and doing well as well. I do believe that the more you hang out with successful people, the more it rubs off on you as well. So that's been a fantastic experience.
does the experience end? Because I see that you haven't confined yourself to writing, that you're actually hosting a podcast now, the Author to Author podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you managed to transition from writing into podcasting?
Yes, I self-published the first time around. And what I noticed is that authors do not get the media attention or the exposure that
Sorry,
they
it's
should get when they're
sorry to, sorry,
self-published.
sorry to cut you across, but this is something really major that I didn't know. Your first work, it was self-published. That's what you're saying?
That's right. I used a self-publishing service. So you pay them, you hand over your manuscript to them, they do everything for you, and then they give you the rights back at the end of the process. And it was a really good experience because I didn't think that I had the technical know-how to go about doing all of that bit, the formatting and the editing and all of that by myself. And that was a fantastic experience. But deep down, I always felt that the books could get a traditional publishing deal. And as I said to you earlier, I've got the rejection letters upstairs to prove that, I'm not their cup of tea. And it doesn't mean that my work isn't any good. It's just that they're looking for maybe something a bit more commercial. And we have to remember that traditional publishing houses, they are a business and they need to know that there's going to be a return on their investment. But as I said to you before, I ended up getting a 3-book deal with a traditional publisher, and that's been a fantastic experience too. So I'm glad that I went through the self-publishing process, because then when I did meet a traditional publisher, I had very high expectations of what I expected from them every single step of the way. And I could say, well, hold on a minute, but when I did this before, you know, um, shouldn't you be doing this now? And holding them to an account. So that's been a fantastic experience as well.
In terms of the podcast, the author to author podcast, yes.
So while I was waiting and sending these synopsises off to all these different places, and the rejection letters were coming in, Loving the Brothers was already out, and I got quite a bit of media attention from that. But we all want the BBC interviews, don't we? We want, we want to be recognised in these higher places, and it just wasn't happening. So I decided, well, while I wait for something to happen, why don't I start my own thing? And I invite other self-publishers who are finding it difficult to get media attention, because I've been there. Why don't I do that and invite people? And I suppose what I really want to leave with your listeners is that do it anyway, and do it afraid, even if it scares you, do it anyway. So I've got experience of interviewing, but interviewing offenders and prisoners and victims through my work in the criminal justice system, but not interviewing other authors. But I suppose there are transferable skills that you can bring across in terms of being actively listening to what someone's saying, building on their answers, asking open questions, all the things that I've been taught about interviewing, I was able to apply to the podcast. So the podcast started on the 8th of March, 2021, which is International Women's Day. And I picked a friend of mine who is also a self-published author, and I said, let's have a go at it. So we tried at least 3 interviews before we managed to get it right. And now I'm in my 6th season of the podcast. I've interviewed traditionally published, independently published authors. Some celebrities have been on the podcast as well. And it's going from strength to strength. I've already got enough authors for season 7 and season 8 of the podcast, and I'm going to get to season 10 and then work out whether I'm still enjoying it or whether I'm still having fun. And I also have sponsorship for the podcast as well. So my podcast is sponsored by Dalgety Herbal Teas. They are a strong Guyanese company, and again, do it afraid. So Mark Dalgety is already one of my Facebook friends, but I don't know him personally. But so I contacted him with the idea that I had, because I figured books and teas go together. And then he came back to me and he said, you need to speak to so-and-so within the company. Here's his email address. So I contacted him. And again, within the hour, Keith came back and he said, can we have a meeting by Zoom on the following Friday? I said yes. And I treated it as a pitching meeting, 3 of them, 1 of me. And I pitched to Dalgety about how I believe that they could support me and get their brand out there. So the podcast is now on 20 plus listening platforms worldwide and 6 radio stations. And the good thing about doing these award ceremonies, when you do go to them, that's when I bumped into the CEO of London Worldwide Radio. He said, "Are you Pamela Haynes? I saw your name on the screen when it came up with the finalists." And I said, "Yes, it's me." And he goes, "Oh, hi, I'm so-and-so from LWR Radio." And I got to meet him in person as well. So people buy into you first before they buy into your product. And I'm really grateful for Dalgety Herbal Tea for their sponsorship. Covers all of my production costs, all my editing costs, all the flyers for the podcast are met by them. So it's a wonderful partnership.
Sounds like such. And I really like how it is you started off with these self-published authors and then everything just seemed to fall into place. One of the things that I've learned while interacting with authors is that some persons are not really aware as to what the entire publishing process entails. Some persons think you write the book, you get the book in stores, end of story. However, there's the marketing that has to happen, there's the promotion that has to happen, and sometimes you find yourself doing different things to promote your book. Some have speaking engagements, some organize workshops. and one or two authors who I've interviewed, just like yourself, who have actually started podcasts because some of them are subject matter experts in their fields. One of them in particular is a social worker, and her book deals with social work related issues. So here she is, podcast on social work, and ever so often in my book, I touch on this. So, it kind of works hand in hand. One of the things I like that you had mentioned is that skills from one of your previous jobs actually came into play in one of your projects right now in terms of interviewing persons. In terms of that particular job, your previous job, did that contribute in you putting together the books that you would have written right now?
Oh, absolutely. At the heart of my books, my main protagonist is a senior probation officer. I was a senior probation officer.
I see what you did
So a
there.
lot of
I see the
people,
link. I see the link.
yeah, so a lot of people, they say to me, is Patty you? And I say no, or they say, oh, did you meet your husband on the train? No, no, it's fiction, but you have to write about what you know about. And furthermore, there are loads of books out there about the police, about the fire service, about the ambulance service, about social work, but not many people write about the probation service and the work that we do as part of the criminal justice system and safeguarding adults and children. So I wanted to put the probation service at the heart of my stories. We save lives as well, just that we can't talk about them because of the confidentiality nature of the work that we do. But I wanted to put probation in the heart of the stories. So people will read about the kind of work that we do, how we work with other agencies, how we safeguard women and their children, how we work with perpetrators. That is a huge part, a huge part of the book. Which I think I've been managed to cover very well because I worked for probation, I think it was 26 and a half years in a variety of different roles. And that lends itself to being one of the major storylines in the book.
Again, things just get more interesting and interesting. Have persons approached you for advice or direction because of the items, because of your writings so far?
Yes, when the book first came out, as I said, I wasn't expecting this big reaction to it. And people were contacting me on social media. First of all, they're talking about my protagonists, what they're going through, Patty, Charmaine, and Rose. And then they end up talking about their own situations. So I quickly had to start signposting people to where they can get help. And this was men as well as women, because what we know about domestic abuse, it doesn't discriminate. It impacts on men, women, children, the communities, and so on. So I now know the National Domestic Abuse Helpline number by heart because I've given it out several times. I've also worked in conjunction with another colleague who helps men and women once the violence has stopped and once they've moved to a place of safety. They're very much in recovery mode, and she helps them and aids them with their recovery as well. So yes, I've done a lot of signposting and a lot of listening to people's stories, and sometimes I don't intend to. I had one radio presenter; she was supposed to be interviewing me, but she ended up in tears on the radio herself as a result of our discussion and so on. So which fits quite nicely with what research says. Research suggests that 1 in 4 women experience domestic abuse in her lifetime, and 1 in 7 men experience domestic abuse. So I never take it for granted that I could be looking at someone who might be completely whole and everything else, but they've gone through a journey themselves and come out the other side.
Uh, Speaking of persons who would have experienced domestic abuse, your book, it's targeted towards adults. Material like this, do you recommend that probably persons who are younger, let's say teenagers, be exposed to it? And also, well, that's my first question. And my second question is, do you think the topic of domestic violence or domestic abuse, that it should be addressed in like secondary schools? And the reason I say this is because sometimes we think that domestic violence or domestic abuse is an adult problem. So, when you become an adult, you deal with those things. However, when it is in an imperfect world in which I think we live in, we have persons who are younger than that, who find themselves in situations like this, that being the
Yeah,
premise.
yeah. I mean, great question. I think that the books are definitely for adults because it contains adult themes. But funnily enough, what happened when I was in Barbados in 2019,
Hmm.
my books were in Cave Shepherd, Shattle House Books, and a couple of other places. And a teacher bought a copy of the book and she took it into school. And my little cousins, I've got cousins who are school age, came home from school and said, Auntie Pam's book was, a passage from the book was read out today by the teacher who was suggesting that they have, copies of the books for their libraries and so on. But I do think that in terms of using the book to raise awareness of domestic abuse, because sometimes people don't know what it is. Young people don't know what it is, and they don't know the different forms of domestic abuse that can happen. So I do believe that little snippets and vignettes from the book could be taken out and read in isolation to start discussion amongst students in particular. I think that would be very useful. So I was delighted to know that happened. I'm hoping that if I get a chance to come back to Barbados next year, I can actually go into the school, talk to the year heads, talk to the heads, in charge of pastoral care, to start having those discussions. I think the pandemic raised a lot of issues where you have, multiple family members living in the same small houses, just one laptop, but you've got 5 children who are expected to use the laptop. You've got parents home from work, all in the same space, can't leave. Globally, we saw the stats around domestic abuse raise, almost 100-fold in terms of reported incidences of domestic abuse as a result of everybody being cooped up together. Tensions were high, money was short. We had whole families in Barbados who all caught COVID and had to be at various hospitals and hotels and so on. So yeah, it was a lot, but I definitely think that young people could benefit from discussion, and it's good to start with fiction because then you're not targeting anybody in particular. So I think that would be a really good place to start.
And I think it's really encouraging as well, because personally, I think topics such as this domestic violence, domestic abuse, stuff like finances, for example, topics like these, we don't touch on enough with younger persons. We just think, okay, they're too young for this. And when they get older, they'll deal with it then. And I think that we forget what it was like when we were younger. And, we were sponges, we were perceptive and receptive. And there are a lot of things that we learned from different sources. Probably some of the things we should have learned from our parents, but we learned from other sources. So I think it's great that your book is being applied in that manner, in that particular instance. But it would be really even better if it would be applied not just in that isolated instance, but on a more general level to just address things like that. If it is that you wanted to get copies of your books, where can we get copies?
In Barbados, Black Rock Books should be getting hold of the copies of the book. It's available on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble. Um, you know, I'm hoping to get the books back into. I still call it Cave Shepherd, but it's not called Cave Shepherd anymore. I think it's called Bridgetown Duty Free. I'm
Mhm.
still hoping to get the books in there as well. Um, yeah, so there's quite a few places where the book is available. It's at Walmart, it's at Target. I've just said where all good books are sold, you should be able to get a copy of Love and the Brothers. It's a global. It's bigger than me now. It's a global phenomenon.
We're nearing the end of 2023, and 2024 is on the horizon. And I mean, you've had like a colorful career, after retirement so far. What is on the horizon for 2024 outside of, loving the children?
Oh, I was going to say that has to be published. 2024, that book has to be published. I also want to do a limited edition trilogy, a box set. of books with gold leaf edges. My chest is high. I've got great expectations about how I want it to look. So I'd like that to happen next year. I'm also speaking to a couple of directors who have asked me to send out copies of the books to them. So you never know. Loving the Brothers trilogy might be a film or a screenplay or in the theatre. My son said to me last week, Mum, if they gave you the opportunity to write the script, would you do it? And I said, yes. I'm going to say yes to everything and then work out afterwards how I'm going to do it. But I will say yes to do it. I've already got my elevator pitch in place. If I was to ever bump into Tyler Perry in the lift, I know exactly what I would like to say to him. So I'm always in a state of readiness and looking ahead and dreaming big dreams for myself. I've already seen myself on the red carpet, heading to some kind of big awards, or an opening of, at the cinema or something. But I'm always dreaming big dreams for myself. And this isn't just pie in the sky. Other people have told me, have Netflix, get in touch with Netflix, get in touch with, Amazon Prime, getting in touch with, and I'm now taking steps towards that in terms of contacting people here in the UK who have been quite successful directors and producers.
Pamela, that sounds sensational. And we would look forward to hearing developments about that as they unfold, of course. So, 2024 would be big for you, but we're also on the edge of our seats to see what happens next.
Thank you very much.
We're wrapping up the interview at this point in time, but before we go, is there anything that you'd like to share with all listeners?
Yes, I would like to say, before we talked about when you self-published, you're not just an author, you're your own PR, you're your own marketer and everything else. So if your listeners feel able to, can they please follow me on social media? My handle is at Loving the Author on Instagram, and I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it, you'll find me. You find me there. And I'll be grateful for the follow and hope that people engage with my content.
Okay, and I think that we will. Ladies and gentlemen, Pamela R. Haynes. Thank you very much for agreeing to this interview, Pamela.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to TLC, Tropical Literature Creators. If you've heard something of interest or something you like, reach out to us. Reach out to our authors. Follow us on social media. We look forward to hearing from you.